agroforestry design. We will explain the agroforestry design taking into account the three components of agroforestry: the woody perennials, resource rafts, the croplands, mainly associated in Europe with the grasslands and agroforestry practices, and the livestock component when we have grasslands. The FAO defines that there are three different main types of agroforestry practices, which are silvopasture, agro-silvopasture, agri-silviculture. In this design system, we will be focused on silvopasture as one of the most relevant type of agroforestry practice in Europe, and because the definition and the establishment of agri-silviculture can be seen in the species and variety selection to establish agroforestry video. With regard to the woody perennial component, let's see what would be the ideal characteristics of a tree species. Self-pruning is very important because then we save money on pruning and it increases timber quality. It should be a bomb of nutrients, meaning that it should uptake the nutrients that are released when we apply a fertilizer, and the roots of the tree should take them and move on into the system. Afterwards, with the fall down of the nutrient of the leaves, the nutrients will be incorporated into the crop. A small amount of superficial roots, that's very important because then the competition with the crop is smaller, without allelopathic effects, because then the understory growth is allowed, producing a small amount of residues to reduce the effect when you saw a crop, or to allow grasslands to grow up as soon as possible. And branches and leaves should have a good structure in such a way that it has the understory will have a small intersection of light, or the understory will have more light because we will have a small intersection for the light to these branches and leaves a specific structure, and also rainfall. Well, agroforestry can be established either in areas with trees that are with a low density or high density. In the high density, they tend to grow, so we have to take into account evolution, natural evolution, that can be smaller as in time. For example, the growth of the Quercus ilex is up to 120 years old, so it's slow. But if we think on the Mediterranean area, on Pinus radiata, eucalyptus that has 20 years to be harvested since planting, the development of this canopy is much higher. Well, here we can see depending on the canopies cover what is annual production in tons per hectare of the pasture in the squares. We can see that it is reduced a lot when you from 10 up to 160 tree cover, but when we have around 25%, is half of the tree cover is half of the initial one. The needle is increased because the lack of light that reaches the down part of the tree means that the photosynthetic activity of the leaves is falling, so they fall down. And afterwards we can see the reduction also of the senescent materials. Well, the distribution of the trees can be different ways, like hedgerows, copses, alley cropping. See here a zone 5 break in Italy, or even in mosaics. Well, but sometimes tree can be damaged, so we have to restrict grazing in some cases. It also depends on the animal that is grazing, but some cases we have to just put fencing, or even using protectors. Some of them are identified as good because of their high survival and growth. Specifically, these ones should take into account the external conditions, because sometimes if it is too warm outside, then this increasing of survival and growth may be restricted. It should be a compatible use of animals with the type of species that we have. We know that the tree damage would be much lower with herbivorous than with lignivorous species. Well, let's see for the silvopasture practice what would be the main aspect to take into account for the design. Well, when we have the knowledge of age, density, and distribution of the tree, the agroforestry optimization will be for silvopasture will be linked to establishment of grassland or croplands. And this is because they are more productive, but has better quality and even more reduces fire risk. Well, if you think in an area that is like this green square, that means, for example, ravens with more than 2 meters, it is and has a lot of trees. It is with high density and not an homogeneous distribution. Maybe it could be a good idea to create corridors in between that reduces cost of clearance and at the same time allows animals to facilitate their transit across the plot and consume the shrublands that are from outside, from these corridors to inside. Well, it's also important to know that not all species has the same kind of palatability, and that it changes with the species, but also with the plant species and the shrublands and so, but also with the type of animal. Okay, for example, Ulex is highly preferred by horse, which doesn't like Rubus or Erica. Goats can consume any kind of Rubus, Erica, Ulex, and donkey has preferences by Rubus. A stocking rate can be progressive, meaning that you establish a stocking rate that with the time reduces the consumers the vegetation that is there in a continuous way, or instantaneous. You can put high stocking rate and things are reduced strongly, and afterwards rotate to another plot to facilitate the growth of this area. Well, if we have shrublands, we have to take into account that we have to have a time adjustment, 1 goat per hectare at the beginning, because they only consume these shrubs, but afterwards they can be replaced by sheep when you have a kind of more herbaceous proportion vegetation in the understory of agroforestry practices. But it could be good if you don't improve the soil to keep the goat. We have been studying making an analysis of the herbaceous shrublands and trees for animals that has a palatability could consume them. For the herbaceous, they have high nutrient levels interesting for the extensive farming systems, but usually there is a difference between the dicots because they have better mineral content than monocots, meaning the grasses. Shrublands, with regard to shrublands, Cytisus, Rubus, and Ulex genders are better to grow animals than Erica and Cajuna, usually associated with more poor soils. Pterospartium, in spite of being a legume, has a low quality or low level of protein content, but in marginal areas, for example, goats really love to consume them. Tree branches has better quality than shrublands. During the summertime, they have a similar quality than the herbaceous species before flowering during the spring. As conclusions, we can say that designing agroforestry should take into account the species compatibility. Silvopasture should take into account the composition of the permanent grassland. Tree branches can be used as a fodder to overcome restriction periods. Palatability should be taken into account, making more compatible for excess uses and livestock species. Thank you very much.